Hi, it's Ben. So we're just gonna go ahead and start assignment 14, Life of Pi. I guess we'll go Act 1. So the ordinary world. Pi's home is in a zoo that his family owns in Pondicherry, India, and he really likes it there. His preparation for adventure. He has two main mentors that he looks up to. His dad, because he's taught him important lessons in life, like the most dangerous animal in a zoo is a human, and then he pulls back the curtain to reveal the mirror. And then his mom, he looks up to his mom, and she comes in later in the story too, still as sort of a role model for him and an ally. His acquired knowledge or skills, he grew up in a zoo, so he knows a lot about animals, and that helps him out a lot later on. So his traits and commonalities of the hero, he has unusual birth circumstances. His family owns a zoo. I wish mine did. That would be super cool, but obviously not everyone's do. He leaves his family or land, so they're traveling from India to Canada, and then so he's leaving his land, and then later on when the boat crashes, he's also losing his family. So like two for one there, two birds, one stone. A sometimes traumatic event that leads to an adventure. Well, his ship crashes and leaves him stranded on a lifeboat, so that would be traumatic, and does cause his adventure. Supernatural help. Pi has three religions, so he relies on the gods of all three of those religions to help him out. And a special weapon that only he can wield, I would say, is the last one. He has a whistle that he uses to keep Richard Parker under control. Now, like, technically anybody can use a whistle, but he's the only one on the boat, and, like, he's training a tiger, so I would say that he's the only one capable of using that. His call to adventure is when his family and himself depart from India, and even though that wasn't really that optional, oh, dinner's ready. Even though that wasn't really that optional, when his boat sinks and crashes, that's like his real call to a sea adventure, and not just from leaving his home to go to Canada. So there's almost like two there. Acceptance or refusal of the call. Well, he was forced into the call whether he wanted it or not. Like, he couldn't have prevented the boat sinking. So, like, in that case, he accepted it just because he was in the lifeboat and he couldn't have stopped the bigger boat from sinking. However, he did want to refuse the call to Canada because he liked their life in India, and he was pretty happy there. And he's very nervous about the trip, and for good reason, because look what happened. Act 2 already. Crossing the threshold. I would say he crossed the threshold when the boat capsizes. He transitions from the old world to the new world. The roads of trials, not triangles. Difficult terrain would be living in a lifeboat, and there's constant rocking, and he has to share like I forget what size it is, but like a 20-foot space with a wild Bengal tiger. So that would be pretty difficult terrain to live in. The tempter or temptress could be either a god, I would say, in this case. He sends like flying fish and a neon whale to Pi, like constantly testing his faith, and then again at the algae island in the end. Remote locations, the lifeboat and the floating algae island, I would say, are like the only two locations in the story, but like the Pacific Ocean. Some unsurmountable barriers, that would be like his hunger and his thirst. He never thought that he was gonna have enough food to last for as long as he did, and also the tiger. He never thought he would deal with Richard Parker the way he did either. Supernatural aid, like I specified before, Pi has three different religions, so he kind of relies on all those gods to keep him on track. Um, Shadow is Richard Parker. He symbolizes the dark side of Pi, and some of his enemies, I would say, are the hyena slash the cook and Richard Parker early on in the story. Some of his allies would be the orangutan, or like Pi's mom, and Richard Parker later on in the story after they're more friendly to each other. The belly of the whale is when Pi's at his lowest point and he's about to give up and he thinks he'll never reach home. But then he spots a floating island and thinks he's saved. His ordeal or final test is when he discovers the final floating island of algae, and it has fresh water, sweet seaweed, but he soon discovers that the island is carnivorous, so he has to make a decision either to stay on the island or leave. Obviously, he chooses to leave because he doesn't want to get eaten by the carnivorous island, but that would be an example of God tempting him to stay because he has to leave the safety of land and a floating island and return back to sea, which is his number one fear right now after he's been out there for 100 days or something like that. But luckily he gets a small reward for leaving and brings the food and some fresh water with him. Act 3. So crossing the threshold back into the known world would be after Pi is floating for many, many more days. He washes up on the shores of Mexico. and he watches Richard Parker run into the forest, and then he passes out there. So the road back, Pi wakes up in a hospital in Mexico. Essentially, his road back is like a journey back to health, sort of, and also to eventually get to Canada, because like as soon as he passes out, he wakes up in the hospital. Like his journey, he was not really there for. But just getting back to who he was and less washed up after the sea. Get it? Washed up. Resurrection. Pi never actually dies, but like his resurrection could be seen as him passing out on the beach and then waking up in the hospital, and like he's malnourished, but he's gonna live. The return of the elixir. So Pi now lives in Canada. He has no like physical object that he brought back with him, like Richard Parker. That would be cool. But he has all his experience and memories from the journey and knowledge gained. And like he technically never returns to his old world, because like his old world was in a zoo in India, but like you can make the comparison that he returns from the new world, as in the sea, to the back to the known world. But in reality, like his new world is in Canada in a new house with new people and none of his family, whereas his old world would have been India in a zoo that he knew with all of his family. So like on the last one, it sort of meets the criteria, but personally, I would argue that. Anyway, that looks like the end. Thanks for watching.